criminals will only be able to claim compensation for being victims of crime in exceptional circumstances under proposals by the Justice Secretary. Kenneth Clarke wants to reform the taxpayer-funded criminal injuries compensation scheme after annual costs trebled to almost £300 million since 1997, with 20,000 criminals being paid more than £75 million, including a rapist and a person convicted of 2 killings. Well, we can hear a little of what the Justice Secretary had to say in the Commons this afternoon.
The overall ambition of the changes is that total spending levels on victims, that's compensation and counselling and support, should remain the same. However, I believe the proposals we're consulting on today will mean that finite funding will be used more wisely. Instead of compensation going to those with the less serious injuries and to those who've been breaking the law, it will be targeted where it counts most, on the most serious injuries. The support services, which many victims need as much as, sometimes more than, compensation, will be available when required, paid for as far as possible by offenders and not by the taxpayer. For families bereaved by homicide and those affected by serious, violent and sexual crimes, these reforms will move compensation onto a sustainable footing and at the same time improve the quality and availability of practical support and advice. Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, this constitutes intelligent, radical reform to sort out a system that isn't working well, and it will give a better deal to victims.
The Justice Secretary there, Ken Clarke, speaking in the Commons. Well, let's get some reaction now from Peter Garsden, who's President of the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers, and he's in Salford for us tonight. What do you make of what the Justice Secretary has been saying?
Well, I act on behalf of the victims of child abuse, and I'm very concerned at the proposals that have been announced because under the present system there is a recognition that in certain cases involving particularly abuse victims it may be inappropriate to take into account convictions that took place after the abuse, particularly where it can be shown that those convictions have arisen directly caused by the abuse, or at least tenuously caused by the abuse. And the present proposals appear to be very dogmatic, and they don't appear to take any account in exceptional circumstances of the needs of the victims of child abuse.
I mean, can you give us, because some of our viewers might question that and say, actually be quite sympathetic to what Ken Clarke is saying, and saying that really why any criminals getting any kind of compensation for anything. But just give us an example, perhaps, if you could, of why you think it's important that sometimes that does happen.
Well, a victim of abuse who is sexually assaulted at the age of 13, 14 covers up what he or she feels, is very ashamed and won't tell anybody, and then descends into a life of drink and drugs in order to anaesthetise himself from his feelings of abuse, which he can't disclose. And that can then lead to a criminal career which is directly caused by the abuse. Now, in those circumstances, it's arguable that it's totally inappropriate to take into account and prevent somebody from claiming compensation for abuse when the convictions that are disqualifying him are directly caused by the very criminal act which he's claiming as a result of, if that's clear.
It is, but I mean, what Ken Clarke would say is that I think something like 20,000 criminals have been paid more than £75 million, and this is, money that the government need to save. They do need to make savings, and they think this is, as he said, an intelligent and radical proposal.
Well, it's wrong to be so dogmatic because, for example, a criminal who is assaulted in a police station and rendered paralysed, even though he's got a list of criminal convictions, is it wrong to prevent him from claiming as a result of a crime of violence when it's the very system that has caused the crime, even though he's a criminal? Whereas, on the other hand, somebody who perhaps breaks into a house, a domestic burglary, and is attacked by the householder, the public would say, well, that's wrong. So it's entirely inappropriate to be completely dogmatic and impose a rigid rule that disqualifies all cases on the grounds that all criminals are undeserving of compensation. Some are and some aren't, depends on the circumstances.
Very interesting to talk to you, actually. Thank you very much for being with us. That's Peter Garsden, who's president of the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. Thank you.
Now we're just getting a bit more detail coming out of Brussels about what's been going on with the discussions with